"You're too old to start over," my coworker said with something like genuine pity when I announced my resignation at age 42. "That's a young person's game. You're at an age where you should be thinking about retirement, not starting something new." Everyone around the table nodded in that sympathetic way that made it clear they agreed. But I smiled, collected my things, and walked out of that conference room for the last time that afternoon. And 5 years later, when two of those same coworkers applied for positions at my company, I knew exactly what to say to them on their first day. "My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm now 47 years old. And I own a software company that disrupted an entire industry, and I did it by starting over at an age when most people told me it was too late." The conference room where my coworkers had delivered their concerned assessment of my career prospects was on the 34th floor of a corporate tower in San Francisco. It was the kind of sterile, impersonal space that all major tech companies have: cold lighting, glass walls, that particular emptiness that comes from spaces designed for presentation rather than actual work. I'd called the meeting to tell my team that I was leaving. I'd worked at DataVault, a data storage and management company, for 11 years. 11 years of promotions and raises and respect within the organization. I was a senior vice president. I reported directly to the CEO. I had a team of 40 people who worked for me. But at 42, I'd realized something important. I'd spent my entire career building someone else's vision. It was time to build my own. My coworker Kevin had been the first to express concern. Kevin was 34. He'd worked his way up, but he was one of those people who believed that age was destiny. That once you hit 40, your window of opportunity had closed. That if you hadn't made it by a certain age, you never would. "Patricia," he'd said, his voice carrying that particular combination of concern and condescension that ageism specializes in, "I have to be honest. You're taking a risk that seems unwise. You have a great position here. You have security. Why would you risk that?" "Because I have something I want to build," I'd said simply. "But you're not a startup person," another coworker, Michelle, had said. Michelle was 36 and had never left a corporate job. "Startups are for young people. People who can work 80-hour weeks. People who don't have the obligations that come with your life stage." I'd heard this before, but it still stung a little. The implication being that because I was older, I must have responsibilities or physical limitations that younger people didn't have. The assumption being that my age automatically disqualified me from the energy and innovation required for entrepreneurship. "I think you should stay," Kevin had continued. "In 5 years, you're going to be 50. You're going to wish you'd held on to this job. You're going to regret taking this risk." "Maybe," I'd said. "Or maybe in 5 years I'll be running a company that disrupted your entire industry." Everyone had laughed at that. They'd thought I was joking. I wasn't. I'd walked out of DataVault that afternoon and never looked back. The first year of building my company, Filter Tech, was the hardest year of my life. And I'd already lived 42 difficult years. I'd started with a team of 3, myself, Marcus, a brilliant engineer who was 32, and Jennifer, a product manager who was 38. We were undersized, underfunded, overwhelmed. But we had something that DataVault didn't have, a real insight into the problems with the current data storage infrastructure. And I had spent 11 years at DataVault understanding exactly what customers needed and couldn't get. We bootstrapped for the first year. We worked out of a 200-square-foot office in a less expensive part of San Francisco. We lived on savings and coffee and the kind of absolute belief that only comes from seeing a solution to a real problem. By year 2, we had our first major contract. A mid-sized financial services company that needed our technology. We'd built something better than what DataVault offered. Something more efficient. Something that solved problems the industry giants hadn't bothered to address. By year 3, we had 12 contracts. We'd hired 17 people. Our revenue was $15 million annually. And we'd started attracting serious venture capital interest. By year 4, we had 50 contracts with some of the largest companies in the United States. We'd expanded to 84 employees. We'd raised $140 million in Series B funding. And venture capitalists were calling us the most innovative company in our space. By year 5, DataVault had been seriously disrupted. Their market share was declining. Our market share was exploding. We'd been valued by potential acquirers at $2.3 billion. And Kevin had called me, asking if we were hiring. He didn't initially identify himself when he reached out. He'd sent an email to our recruitment address with a resume attached. But I knew who he was immediately. Kevin's name was distinctive enough, and his background was specific enough, that there was no doubt. I'd called him directly. "Kevin," I'd said. "I got your application. How are you?" There'd been a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Patricia," he'd said finally, and I could hear the recognition mixed with something like shame. Yes. I'm applying. I heard Filter Tech is hiring senior engineers." "We are," I confirmed. Interesting timing. How is DataVault treating you? They've restructured, Kevin had said, and I could hear the stress in his voice. After the market share collapse, they've been cutting teams. Making layoffs. It's been difficult. I'm sorry to hear that, I'd said, and I wasn't happy that Kevin was suffering. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't a certain satisfaction in knowing that my vision, the one he told me was foolish at 42, had been right. The position is yours if you want it, I'd said. Senior software engineer. The salary is $280,000 annually, plus equity options. You'd be reporting to Marcus, who you might not remember, but who was my co-founder. I remember Marcus, Kevin had said quietly. He was good. He is, I confirmed. And I think you could learn a lot from him. From all of us. Welcome to FilterTech. A week later, Michelle had applied. Michelle's email was more direct. She'd written, I followed FilterTech's growth. I'm impressed by what you've built. I think I could contribute. I'd like to interview for a product management role. I'd called her too. Michelle, I'd said. I got your application. Patricia, she'd replied. Her tone was careful. I'm assuming this is some kind of test. It's not, I'd said. It's a job offer. We have a VP of product role opening up. It would report to me. The position is $350,000 annually, plus significant equity. You'd be building product strategy for a company that's disrupting the entire data storage industry. The company you were convinced I was too old to start. Michelle had been quiet for a moment. Why would you hire me? She'd asked. After what I said to you? Because you're good at what you do, I'd said, and because I'm not the kind of person who refuses to work with people who doubted me. I'm confident enough in what I've built that I don't need vindication through exclusion. That's generous, Michelle had said. It's strategic, I'd corrected. You're good. I need good people. And I think working at FilterTech will give you a perspective on innovation and risk-taking that your corporate career hasn't provided. That benefits both of us. Okay, Michelle had said. I accept. On Kevin's first day, I brought him into my office. Welcome to FilterTech, I said. I know you've had a lot of time to think about this since we talked on the phone. I want to explain why I hired you. Because you're a better person than I was to you? Kevin had asked, and there was genuine remorse in his voice. Partly, I'd said. But more importantly, because I wanted you to understand something. You told me I was too old to start over. You told me that entrepreneurship was a young person's game. You made me feel small and foolish for pursuing something I believed in. Kevin had started to apologize, but I'd held up my hand. I didn't hire you to punish you, I'd continued. I hired you because working here will show you something your corporate career never will. It will show you that innovation isn't about age. It's about vision and persistence and willingness to take risks. And at 47, I was better equipped to start FilterTech than I would have been at 32, because I had experience that a younger person doesn't have. I understand, Kevin had said quietly. I don't think you do, I'd replied. Not yet. But you will. And in a few years, when you've been part of something that disrupted an entire industry, you'll understand that you were wrong about me. And more importantly, you'll be less likely to underestimate someone based on their age. When Michelle came in, I had a similar conversation. You told me I was at an age where I should be thinking about retirement, I'd said. You told me startups were for young people. You made assumptions about my energy level and my capabilities based on a number. I'm sorry, Michelle had said. I believe you, I'd said, and I'm hiring you because I want you to experience what it's like to work at a company that was built by someone who refused to accept age-based limitations. I want you to understand that some of the best innovations come from people who have the experience of having failed before, of having learned, of having understood markets over decades instead of just years. Over the next few years, Kevin and Michelle became integral parts of FilterTech's success. Kevin's technical work was exceptional. Michelle's product strategy helped us expand into adjacent markets. And both of them began to understand what I'd been trying to teach them. Ageism in tech is real. It's systemic. It's based on the assumption that young people are more innovative, more energetic, more relevant. But it's also completely wrong. The average age of successful startup founders is actually 45. 45. Not 25. The entrepreneurs who had the most successful exits have typically worked in their industries for years before starting their own companies. They understand markets. They understand problems. They understand how to execute. But society tells us that entrepreneurship is a young person's game. That if you haven't made it by 30, you're too old. That starting over at 40 is foolish. I'd refuse to accept that narrative. And FilterTech was the result. By year 7, FilterTech had grown to 740 employees. We'd disrupted DataVault so completely that they'd been forced to pivot their entire business model. We'd become the industry standard for data storage and management. We'd been approached about IPO, and we were preparing for a public offering that would value the company at approximately $4.2 billion. Kevin and Michelle were both part of the IPO preparation. Both would become very wealthy when the company went public. Both would have significant equity stakes that would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And both, I think, understood the lesson of filter tech in a way that very few others did. One day, Kevin came into my office with something printed out. "I found this," he said. It was the email he'd sent when he'd applied to filter tech. I wanted to print it out. As a reminder of how wrong I was. "What are you going to do with it?" I asked. "Read it every day," Kevin said. "To remind myself never to underestimate someone based on their age. To remind myself that the best people often come from unexpected places. To remind myself that when I tell someone they're too old to do something, I might be wrong." Michelle had a similar realization. She started a mentorship program at FilterTech specifically for mid-career professionals who were considering starting their own companies. A program designed to show them that 40 wasn't too late. That 50 wasn't too late. That experience was an asset, not a liability. "The narrative in tech is so focused on young founders," Michelle had told me. "We celebrate the 25-year-old who drops out of Stanford and builds a billion-dollar company. But we ignore the 45-year-old who builds something better because she understands her market completely." "Why do you think that is?" I'd asked. "Ageism," Michelle had said simply. "Combined with the fact that young founders make better stories. They make us feel like anything is possible. Whereas an older founder just makes us feel old. But the older founder's company is often better," I'd pointed out. "Exactly," Michelle had said. "But we don't tell those stories. And we should." I'm sitting in my office now, overlooking San Francisco. The Filter Tech offices occupy the entire top floor of a building in the financial district. The view is extraordinary. On a clear day, you can see all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. The company is preparing for IPO. Our valuation is holding steady at $4.2 billion. Kevin and Michelle will both become very wealthy when we go public. Kevin's equity stake alone will be worth approximately $380 million. Michelle's will be worth approximately $420 million. They'll owe their wealth, in part, to me. To my refusal to accept the narrative that 42 was too old. To my willingness to take a risk that everyone around me said was foolish. But more than that, they'll owe their wealth to their willingness to grow. To understand that they'd been wrong. To embrace working for someone who'd been dismissed by them, and to learn what it meant to work at a company that was genuinely innovative. DataVault is still in business, but barely. They've pivoted their business model several times, trying to compete with us, but they can't seem to find their footing. Kevin's old colleagues have mostly been laid off or have taken positions at other companies. The company that once seemed so stable, so secure, is now struggling to survive. And Filter Tech, the company that everyone told me was too old to start, is about to become one of the most successful tech companies in the world. When we go public, my personal stake in the company, 47% as founder and CEO, will be worth approximately $1.98 billion. I will be a billionaire. At age 47. The same age Kevin and Michelle told me I should be thinking about retirement. Kevin came to me last week with a question. "Do you regret not starting Filter Tech earlier?" he'd asked. "If you'd started at 30, imagine how much bigger it could be." "I don't," I'd said. "Because I couldn't have started Filter Tech at 30. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the credibility. I didn't have the understanding of markets that I developed over 11 years at DataVault. Filter Tech is exactly as big as it should be, at exactly the right time, built by someone exactly the right age to build it." The right age being 42, Kevin had said. "The right age being whatever age you are when you decide to do it," I'd corrected. "If you'd told me I was too old at 35, I would have disagreed. If someone tells you you're too old at 55, you should also disagree. The only age at which you're too old is the age at which you believe you are," Kevin had nodded. "I'm going to remember that," he'd said. "When I'm talking to younger people at the company, I'm going to tell them about Filter Tech. I'm going to tell them about how the company was built by someone everyone said was too old. And I'm going to tell them that age is just a number, and what matters is vision and execution." Michelle had said something similar during one of her mentorship sessions. "When people tell you you're too old, they're really saying, 'I don't understand your vision,'" she told a group of mid-career professionals interested in entrepreneurship. "And that's okay. You don't need everyone to understand. You just need to understand." When Filter Tech goes public next month, the story will probably make headlines. 42-year-old woman builds $4 billion company. There will be profiles. There will be think pieces about ageism in tech. There will be renewed interest in mid-career entrepreneurship. And maybe that will change things. Maybe that will make it easier for the next 42-year-old woman, or man, to start their own company without everyone around them expressing concerned pity. But whether or not it changes the broader narrative, I know what changed for me. I decided that the opinions of people who underestimated me didn't matter. I decided that their ageist assumptions weren't my responsibility to accept. I decided that being 42 wasn't a liability. It was an asset. And 5 years later, I built a company that disrupted an entire industry. The same coworkers who told me I was too old now work for me. The same company that seemed like such an impenetrable fortress to them is struggling because we out-innovated them. The same secure jobs they were so concerned I would lose are now insecure because their company is failing. But I didn't need them to fail for me to succeed. I just needed to believe in myself. And apparently, that was all it took.